Not perfect, but acceptable.
Yeah.
Welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe, everyone.
Well, Adam is here, Mr. Hash Bash, of course, Rick Thompson, Deborah Young, Jim Salame, starting right off the bat. In fact, he was the first one here.
Jamie Lowell, host.
It's all true. So let's give some tribute to our great sponsors and then dig into
Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, the Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com.
Sounds good, man.
So happy Tuesday, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, so last week we had David Rudoy talking about some police encounters and some advice on those interactions and things that he's discovered. I thought it was pretty interesting. He kind of like said what it seems like that what started off being training on how to get around some technicalities or to entice people to go one way or another during investigation has just turned into common practice, kind of with this idea, with this idea these cops have a little bit more reach in these situations than they actually do, and it's just very frustrating. But he gave us a lot of good insight, I thought, and just still want to keep that discussion in the air a little bit because it's important, and people need to know that they have rights that are at stake, and the police aren't there to help protect them. They're there to help achieve a particular ends. The means that they use are varied. They're not always truthful.
The best way for people to view that is to go find our YouTube channel, take a look at last week's show, or our Facebook page where you can find that as well.
So yeah, Josh has been really good with that. He's also a board member of GLEN, Great Lakes Expungement Network, and we'll get an update from him. And I think Josie's working in his office today, so maybe they will pop on too, and we'll see what's going on. Mikal Goodman, who's a candidate for a Pontiac City Council seat, will be on today. And we haven't had as many on this year as in previous years, but we'd like to highlight those friendly people running for offices, whether local or state or federal. And we may have Andy Levin on or a interview with him soon, speaking of a federal figure. But Mikal's going to come on with Leah Skylar, who's been on the show before, who's working on his campaign and who is also the chair of the Young Duns of Michigan. So we'll have a lot of cool stuff to talk about. And we're going to get to a Cannapalooza recap. I think those of us there had a good time this weekend. There's another event coming up in Clio this week, which should be pretty good for a lot of people. There is we're talking about the bridge walk and the rally and and that kind of stuff coming up. But we do happen to have the benefit of some important breaking news concerning one of our great advocacy organizations, Michigan Normal. And I just wonder, Rick, if you'd like to share with everybody what the latest is with Michigan Normal.
Rick.
Is he frozen?
He might be frozen.
I hope he's frozen, but he's just
Either that or he's voting or something.
Oh, there he goes.
All right, Adam.
We don't know what you're saying, Rick. We can't understand you.
Please disable all of the Wi-Fi running things on your home.
You can't understand me?
Oh, yeah, no. Every 10th word we're hearing.
Hey, Adam, are you aware of this information? Could you give a couple of hints?
I'm a part of it. I just have no recollection of the realities of it. I know that we had 4 board members retire, and we got 4 new ones. And I could take a guess, but I'm hoping that Rick's going to be able to.
Do this. He needs to be. But
clear up his technology.
Good news.
But yeah, we We had Brad Forrester and Matt Abel and Ron White and one more I can't remember. Retired. Golly.
Reverend Steve.
Reverend Steve was already retired.
Oh, okay. He just stopped doing events, huh?
He wasn't on the board. Who else
Okay,
retired?
can you hear me?
The Dr. and Mrs.
Brad
Proctor?
Forrester, Matt Abel. Nope, Brad Forrester, Matt Abel, Joe White, and Jessica Finch.
There
Jessica,
you
that
go.
was the fourth, right?
Hey, we can hear you right now.
And so,
Yeah,
Take
we
it
can
away,
hear
Rick.
this. So.
I know. Isn't that great? Yeah, just in time to help Adam out. Okay, so of course we elected yesterday to the board Zara Abbas, who's a big friend of our show. She is now the secretary of the board of directors of Michigan Normal. Also joining the board, and Quinette Sarfo, Q. Joining the board too, Colin McDougall, original Jazz Cabbager, and I was fortunate enough to be elevated from my position on the board to executive director.
And Thomas
All
Levine
right.
was appointed to the board.
Yep.
Oh, right on, man.
Yep.
What
And,
a good board. What a great board.
And Rick is now our new ED. So
Yeah.
when you see the letters ED on TV, think Rick Thompson.
Yeah. Not erectile dysfunction.
Thank you.
I didn't go there.
Yeah, well, neither did I, but age took me there.
Hey, that is awesome. And Colin hasn't been around. He's been working. There goes Rick. He'll come back on with a better, stronger connection, I'm sure.
He's got to get that little blue pill. He'll be fine.
Yeah. And, but that is very cool news. And whenever he can be back around, he's more than welcome. He's just been working on some projects and stuff like that. And I think, that this group seems poised to, to work, that the advocacy groups, activists, there's stuff to do again. There's a lot of it. And, Michigan Normal has been a central, the probably most consistent active group getting shit done.
We've got a lot to do now. Now that we've kind of crossed that line, now the consumer is more important than ever. We've gotten away from the illegalities of life. And now we need to look after the consumer and make sure that they know what's going on and they're protected. And so I think Michigan Normal, the future has more work than the past.
Yeah, and there's also protecting existing rights. That's on the table right now too. The Steve Linder's making it very clear in Lansing that they're going full steam ahead, but their plan to try to make more restrictions and burdens on caregivers and others, and to benefit themselves, which includes a PR campaign and really trying to target enough people to get their supermajority vote. I'd like to believe that that's not very likely, and maybe it isn't, but it's a lot more likely if we all stand aside and don't get in the way of that, and actually try to improve conditions.
No, I think it's important we embrace the opposition and expose them for what they are. I think it's important that people know what these people are trying to do and what their concepts are and what their thought processes are. Even if they never get a legislator to back them up, I think it's important to show that at this point they haven't had anybody come out on their side. And they've already introduced their, this is like the second or third inning for these people already.
Right.
Steve
So,
Linder's he's been up to the plate a couple times and struck out already.
Well, yeah, he has, but he's gotten paid every time, so I guess he kind of wins.
That's the thing is, you have to look at it for what it is, and these are paid lobbyists who are milking their customers, who happen to be industry people.
And point being ultimately is that a group led by Rick and yourself and the new people coming in, it sounds like a really competent, active group that can really help support doing something about these issues. And I think it's really good for all of us. Okay, congratulations, Rick.
Well, thank you.
It's been a while.
Congratulations, all the people.
And he's saying congratulations to everybody.
We've
We've come a long way. I think he's
That's
thinking,
all right.
Shot.
right?
Yeah, we've gone a long way. And kudos to Matt Abel for a decade of leadership of Michigan Normal,
Yeah.
including, all of the MMFLA nonsense, and then the MRTMA, and serving as the representative from Michigan Normal on the negotiating committee for the MRTMA language, and all the things that Cannabis Council has done.
And he didn't want to give it up. I mean, Matt was working after he was no longer on the board last night in a meeting. He was trying to direct people, and we were like, "Hey, man, we appreciate it."
The transition is difficult, man.
Yeah, your time is over, Mr. Abel.
He's got Levine in there now. He's there's
Well,
still
we're
a
not
connection
worried
is
about
still
that,
there.
but it was like he was trying to run things, and it's like, hey, we got, we appreciate that.
It's all new. Hey,
He was
Old
one of the
habits
hardest workers there's been.
so Jen's asking me a question about getting something printed. She's had a hard time getting through. So this is how we're going to communicate, I guess. Yes, Jen. Yes is the answer.
That's a pretty bold commitment to make on video.
Yes.
Just saying.
I'll say yes
So-
too, for the hell of it.
So yeah, congratulations to everyone. Like Colin, Zahara, Rick. What a good group, man. I mean,
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
Anquinette, geez, man. What a great group. So that was about. Jen's been working with us, of course, with ASA quite a bit. She's been taking up a lot of the issues when local policy is going to change and make things more restrictive for caregivers. She's been really good about going to those meetings, learning about those different policies, and being a part of helping to get people there, and speaking out against it, and and that type of stuff. She and Amy are going to together be at the Clio Cultivation Cup next week, or this coming up weekend, and have a booth and give out pertinent information for patient stuff, and of course Jaden's bill, letting which is to allow, introduced by Rep. Garza, to allow pediatric patients to use cannabis on school grounds. And it was about getting some stuff. That was about getting some stuff printed for that event, and that should be pretty cool. So, much like Cannapalooza that we just attended, I'd like to just go over a little bit for a second. The Clio Cup is, is a caregiver event where the consuming and the other things that go on are with patients. There's other places, other things, other educational opportunities like the one I just described going on there, so everybody can show up, but to go inside like the tent or whatever, you have to be a patient. So that's how that's set up, and that's how Cannapalooza was. And I think a lot of us had a good time. I think Deb just dropped out; she was there, and in fact, she was a big part of all that because she lined us up with our sponsorship opportunity with Jazz Cabbage there with John and everybody, and just went and had a good time, really, with not a whole lot, similar to like the ability to hang out at Hash Bash Cup earlier and not just have a good time and not really have a whole lot else going on, but to hang out and enjoy it. That's kind of what it was like this time around. We had a vendor tent, but we weren't there selling anything or doing much. Had some like basic things printed up to give out to people, and we just used it as our kind of a camp to check out the music and the other stuff going on, and it was a really great weekend. A little hot maybe for a lot of people, but really beautiful land and a lot of cool people hanging around. And I just had a great time. Colin was there with us, and there are trials and tribulations in that event, in that organization, and there was stuff going on there too. And some of it was a discrepancy over it being a like a medical event as opposed to just anything goes kind of an event, and that was going on. But anyway, other than that, man, I had a great time. I think that some good things were established. Now, some local people were complaining, and they were causing some problems coming on the property and stuff like that. There were some police. They must have been called and complained about for various reasons. They were hanging around. Some were trying to come, from what I understand, come onto the property for different reasons. And, that was all dealt with. And throughout the whole thing, that whole group that put stuff on just did a great job. Between them, they're working out different things or whatever. But that's gone on for a few years now, and it was, just another great experience. I mean, to rattle on about it, Rick was there. We used to have Deb on here with us, as I said, who was there, but I think you concur. We had a pretty good time. Darren McCarty swung through and hung out for a little bit.
That event's always been a good time. John always puts together a good event.
And this particular piece of property was, was just really cool to hang out on, So one of those weekends in the summer, you're hanging out on a cool piece of property. There was bonfire, great music, I guess all the components of a good time. So.
Well, we had quite a few people from the industry there. Joe Sullivan was there. You mentioned Colin. Amy Carter was there and did a talk about Jaden's Law. Of course, Colin had a nice speech too. The music was top flight with Les Older and the Ganja Gang reunion, which was just a fantastic set to close up Saturday evening. And then the wonderful person that performed on Settlement that came in an orange VW microbus.
Yeah,
you couldn't get better music than that. But the people, really, that's what makes an event. I mean, you can have great music and shitty people and then have a horrible event. But we had, just a ton of folks that really care about cannabis. And when you talk about camping and vending, when you're that close to each other, you sort of have to get along or else you have some friction. And there was an awful lot of getting along. And Josie Scoggin was there with Brenda. Sons and Daughters United had a big old tent going on. Quite nice.
It's all true. It was pretty cool.
I would say that's when asked, that's probably the number 2 reason besides driving to keep a medical card is to have access to some of these events. It's worth what you pay the state to have that card in your pocket to get you into the med tent or the medical event.
Well, for a lot of retailers, it represents at least, a 15% discount essentially,
That's
right?
True.
They typically discount 10% and then also the sales tax that you don't pay for med. So yeah, that's a great reason to keep a card in your pocket. And Brian Barger, of course, very generous. Brian, as he typically is, he was working Cannapalooza. Brian donated a jar of cannabis to the workers, to the folks out in the tents, and we were happy to distribute that one single stick at a time for him. It's cool.
People tend to appreciate it when you hand them over some free joints.
Yeah,
and that's true. But when you look at somebody that does it consistently, then you can recognize a good soul, and that's what I've seen from Brian. So,
well, I think because of his generosity, I've experienced a lot of his harvest a couple of times in a row. A few jars.
It was nice.
It's quite nice. Yeah.
Susan Fisher drove up from Flint too. A lot of folks came up, some just for day trips. I actually had a visit from some of my family members out at Cannapalooza, which was very special for me.
So anyway, good time. Hope that it goes on. Every year has its challenges, and it's always up in the air. So hope that it continues because it's been a cool thing for a while now. Anyway,
how about if we take a moment and say best wishes to Rory Gould, who seems to be in the hospital with COVID right now.
Oh boy. I
Yeah,
know that.
I saw that.
Let's go, Rory.
Yeah, he was in ICU.
Yeah, he's on the mend. He's getting better. He's on ice.
Yeah, that and a very important person in music history recently passed away. I know that's Deb is a huge Stones fan, so a little off-putting for her, I guess. So obviously Charlie Watt died. So anyway, there you go. Oh yeah, and last week too, besides Brudoy, we did do a tribute to Eddie Lepp, and Bobby West came on for that. And he just posted today too, incidentally, that he's going to be doing a squash off at the Boston Freedom Rally.
Yeah.
So I guess that'd be the latest news to add in about what's going on with him. But he also, and last week on Medical Mondays and last night on Medical Mondays, they talked about Eddie Lepp, and Bobby joined last night also and got in on that. So it's that's an important part of the history. That was part of his message last night. It's for people to make sure they understand all the stuff, all the time and energy and people that went into building stuff to now. It's got decades of things to think about and people to be aware of. And it made a lot of sense. That's why we like to talk about that stuff on this show and get that information on record. And then
we talk about preserving the culture of cannabis.
Yeah,
that's what we do. We preserve the culture of cannabis by sharing those stories and getting that video.
Yeah. And then John Sinclair came on and we discussed his newly formed U.S. foundation and its purpose and preserving a lot of the works and art that he's created over the years, and his ability to do what he needs to do a little bit and generate some income off of like a lot of the stuff that he's put in over many years. And that was great to have him on again. It always is. And, has a lot of great stuff to say. So I know that Adam's a big part of it. Has been looking out for John's best interest for a long time. And this is like one of the new incarnations of how to do that. We'll be guiding a lot of this stuff. And,
I mean, we've been talking about some of this, him and I, for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of what we've been working on has finally come to fruition. So it's kind of nice to see that it's about to happen in ways that we would have never imagined. I mean, we had ideas, but things have changed drastically. So it's all good, as we say.
Yeah, it was just difficult to even get it set up and things arranged the way that he wanted, and finally, kind of a lot of things lined up. It seems like, and as you said, you go way back talking about this, and finally, when something kind of comes to fruition like that, gets it in place, that's pretty cool to be celebrated, and that's what we tried to do last week.
Yeah.
So, and about what are we starting off with? We're going to start off with Josh when he comes on at 4:30. And
let's in the meantime, Jamie,
with,
if you don't mind, let's talk about the ENTHEOFEST.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll talk about the ENTHEOFEST. September 19th, we all know. The press release just went out today. A special thanks to Rick Thompson for helping put that together. We're really excited about it. We have a gentleman named Barking Dog, Daryl Brown, from the Upper Peninsula of St. Ignace. St. Ignace, by the way, is one of the oldest cities in Michigan. It's celebrating its 350th anniversary this year, which is crazy to think about. He will be our keynote speaker. He's part of the First Nations civil rights movement. He's on the board appointed by the governor, which is a team of 15 artists on a cultural board with the state. And they serve a 3-year term. And he's also an award-winner artist. He paints in atavistic art, which is an art that conjures up ancestral pasts and cultures, and just really beautiful, really amazing art that he's also going to have on display at the ENTHEOFEST. William Leonard Picard will be there. William Leonard Picard was incarcerated for transporting LSD across the country about 20 years ago and was released last year. He's flying in from New Mexico. He's an amazing man that did a lot of work while he was incarcerated on research for recovery using psychedelics. And so he's got a lot. He got his PhD while he was behind bars. I mean, he's an amazing man. So we're happy to have him come in. And then we've got speakers from all over the state, like Senator Jeff Irwin and House of Representative, Yusuf Rabi. It's a celebration of Mother Earth and the sacred medicines and fungi that Mother Earth provides. Obviously, there's a need for that with the opiate pandemic, and right now there's just high anxiety in the world too. And these are things that can't hurt the body, so there need to be better laws. This is also a celebration of the anniversary of the resolution that was passed September 20th, 2020 in the city of Ann Arbor to decriminalize plant medicines and fungi, which was then followed by another speaker at the ENTHEOFEST, prosecuting attorney Ellie Savitz, proclamation, an ENTHEOFEST policy that makes all entheogens in the county of Washtenaw basically decriminalized, which is fantastic. So we're trying to motivate and get people together for this incredible feat that we want to do in the state of Michigan to decriminalize in the entire state. We're getting a lot of help from Lansing and a lot of help from the organizations that are around the state of Michigan. ENTHEOFEST is sponsored by Decriminature Michigan, as well as Students Association for Psychedelic Studies at University of Michigan.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, man. It's going to be a blast, and it's just really awesome that this is the first one, the original.
Inspired by Hash Bash.
And we've had ibogaine talked about at Hash Bash in the past, so it's kind of neat that this has finally happened in Ann Arbor. Dana Beal used to come out for many years and push ibogaine, and that is a healing path. So it's nice to see that this finally happened in Ann Arbor, and it's even better to celebrate it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great celebration. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that there's still to do, obviously, and we're just excited. This isn't a celebration where we encourage anyone to, come using psychedelics. We want people, nice work. We want people to be present with us and help just organize and celebrate this in a proper way. There's going to be time to do that later. But incidentally, it's September 19th at 11:11 a.m. at the DIAC in front of the Hatcher Law Library there on University of Michigan's campus.
Nice. And with that, we actually have our next guest.
Yeah.
Michigan cannabis attorney, Joshua Covert. How are you doing, sir?
Hello. Good. Doing great. It's good to see you guys.
All right, man. The beard's looking pretty hefty. Pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
It's hard work.
Hey, man. So, thanks for coming on, and we want to talk about a couple of things. One is a kind of a continuing of a conversation from last week when we had Attorney David Rudoy on, just about this kind of pattern of police interactions and the methodology that goes on there, which involves police finding ways to bypass civil rights, kind of move around the reach that they are supposed to actually have at the moment, meaning, asking for ID, detaining people without being able to describe them being involved in any behavior of concern, and things for people to look out for, when they're in that situation, and just trying to help people out with how it actually works out there and how to deal with it a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the best type of police interaction is no interaction. I guess one place to start. And what I see a lot of times is, like what you mentioned, is police overreach, where they know they don't have enough to get a search warrant, but they feel that if they come called a knock and talk, it's actually a police procedure they're trained on, where they come up to the door generally wearing a lot of times it's narcotics enforcement team officers, so they'll be wearing casual clothing, and they'll come all crossed real friendly and usually come up with some kind of ruse. Like I've seen it where they'll say, hey, we got to report that there's a meth lab on the street here, and we just want to make sure that you don't have one. Do you mind if we come take a look? And then the person says, well, I have a marijuana grow, and they're like, oh, we're not worried about that. We're just here to make sure you don't have a meth lab, right? And then so they come in and they're like, well, hey, while I'm here, why don't you show me your marijuana grow, so I can just check it off the list, so to speak, even though there is no list, right? And then I've seen it where the person will say, oh, okay, because by that point the officers kind of develop some trust with them, and then they'll go in and find some violation and charge them with felonies, and that was the whole reason they were there. Well, it wasn't because of some meth lab or something else, but that's ultimately the ruse they come up with to get in someone's door. So I say, this is my rule in general. If I don't know who's at my door, I don't answer it.
Open it.
I don't care, you know.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Man, this
See
is some good
police
stuff.
approach you. You know, I think the best thing to do is to definitely don't allow any sort of search without a search warrant, you know, because if they could get a search warrant, they wouldn't be approaching you without one.
He's going in and
So
out.
those are just my kind of general rules of thumb when it comes to police interaction.
Right.
Oh, you can't hear me?
No, we like heard bits and pieces, and I think like enough to understand generally what you're saying. But yeah, it kept on going in and out, man. For some reason.
Okay, maybe is that a little bit better?
I can hear you like that. Yeah. So I mean, okay, cool. If they're at the door, knocking at the door, they don't have a warrant.
If they had a warrant, they wouldn't be knocking.
Right.
Well,
there
are knock warrants,
ask.
but
well, they sometimes have a
if
warrant
they have
for
a
somebody's
warrant,
arrest and they're trying to get into
they
a
might
house.
knock, but
Right.
a warrant for arrest doesn't allow them to enter your house.
Right.
It's not a search
I've
warrant.
seen where they try to wiggle in, trying to use it as the basis, though.
Yep. And that's wrong.
You're going out again. All
right, I guess at that point I would answer the door.
Right.
I can try to reconnect on a different. I'm using Wi-Fi right now. Maybe there's something going on with my office Wi-Fi. I can try my cell signal.
Yeah, turn off your cell phone and any other gadgets that are running your Wi-Fi, and then go off Wi-Fi for the Zoom or for the streaming.
Yeah, for sure. You're saying some great stuff, and we're only catching a little bit of it. So we can fix it. Let's do
Is that better?
I can hear you right now.
Yeah. The theme,
but you froze again, maybe.
StreamYard not living up to reputation today. But the theme of what Josh is saying is very consistent with what David said last week. Keep your interactions to the minimum. Don't interact if you don't have to. If you're on your own premises, you're not obligated to speak to the police unless they have a warrant. And make sure that you don't give them any permissions. You don't give them the ability to search your person or your automobile unless you are in custody. Ask if you're being detained. Ask if you're free to go. Those are some of the standard things, but they're so crucial when you have that interaction. Tough to remember at the time, but important.
Yeah, it's a stressful situation, so it's good to be aware of these things.
You're never obligated to speak to the police. Not to correct what Rick said. You're never obligated to speak to them. I would always ask for a warrant I would always ask for a lawyer if I was going to talk to them about anything that they wanted to talk to me about. I don't mind talking to them about crazy shit that they have no interest in. But if it's something they want to talk to me about, there will be a lawyer that I'm paying sitting there to talk to them with me.
Well, that's what Dave was saying. Tell them, blame it on your lawyer. You're not really going to say anything unless he's present. So
that's right. He did say that.
Yeah. And they shouldn't continue after that, is what he said. They do,
right.
Of course, right. But they shouldn't continue after that. Josh is still frozen over here, which is really too bad because.
Well, I will share with you some advice about pleading the Fifth. Also, once you say I plead the Fifth Amendment, then you absolutely have to shut up. There was a recent court case where it was determined that even after pleading the Fifth, a person continued to talk, which meant that their prior declaration that they weren't going to speak anymore was no longer mattered. It didn't have any validity. So everything he said afterwards was considered against him. So.
Yeah, let's try this. Yeah, because you just invoke that as the reason why you're not saying anything. But if you do actually say stuff, it gets counted against you. Hey, Josh,
what we mentioned was the Fifth Amendment. When you claim the Fifth Amendment, at that point, you shut the hell up and you don't say anything else afterwards, right? Because if you speak after declaring the Fifth, then you've kind of revoked your Fifth Amendment privilege. So at least that's what I've read.
Correct. And if you don't actually invoke it, they can actually, in some cases, use that silence against you because you're not exercising the Fifth. So you're best to exercise the Fifth Amendment and then not say anything afterwards. And you have to be very clear about it and say, I'd like to speak with an attorney. I exercise my Fifth Amendment. Either of those should get the questioning to stop. But there's this really crazy case that was out of Louisiana where it went up on a federal appeal and the defendant in that case asked for a lawyer dog. He said, "Well, I want a lawyer dog," to the detective, and the courts came back and said he did not exercise his Fifth Amendment right because there is no such thing as a lawyer dog, not DAWG like the guy said it, so to speak, but DOG in the court case, and they said they could use that against him because he never invoked it because he asked for a lawyer dog, and those don't exist.
That's stupid.
Yeah, isn't it? It's crazy, but I'm just saying, like, that's how.
It's like
The court ruling.
It's like saying, I want a lawyer, man.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So this just goes to show that oftentimes we as average citizens believe we have an understanding of what our rights and responsibilities are, but the way that the courts interpret things, not always the way that we have it in our head. And if we learned things 20 years ago, just like Josh said, brand new court cases can change the interpretation that's and the protections offered to you. You have to stay up on it. And that's usually by listening to the advice of an attorney like we have right now. Thanks, Josh, for helping all these people with your advice.
For sure. Anytime.
And just one of the things that David cautioned is he said, if the police are ordering you to do something, even if you're familiar with that, it's questionably legal. It's likely on an unlawful order, but you're being ordered to do it. It's the best policy to do it and address the violations later. Circumstantially, otherwise that situation gets escalated beyond anything that you want to deal with or whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with them I think for the most part that I guess it's certainly a fact by fact sort of case by case analysis, and there would be some situations where I could see it, maybe the other way, but for the most part, it's real easy for the prosecuting attorney to try to argue that someone is committing an offense which is known as restricting and obstructing a police officer. And basically one of the ways they can prove that is that you failed to comply with a lawful command. And that becomes a 2-year high court misdemeanor or essentially a felony. And so that can add to the whole situation. And it's better off to now it's kind of interesting that Dave was talking about that. Dave and I actually did a case together during COVID, a jury trial where we were defending someone for resisting a police officer. And we were able to show to the jury that it was an unlawful command. Now, so she ended up, winning, but at the same time, she had to go through a year waiting for trial, hiring attorneys, all of the stress of possibly being a felon. And it wasn't, I don't think it was worth it, but every situation's different. And there are some times when an officer gives you an unlawful command, it may be in your best interest to not comply. But I know it's hard to make that call when someone's in the situation. And so I think the difference between default policy is to comply with the officer if it's a lawful command.
Right. But sometimes they might order something and you might have the opinion or really firmly believe it's not lawful. But under those circumstances, his point was that could lead to an escalation that you don't want. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it seems to happen a lot when somebody comes up and detains, when an officer or agent comes up and detains somebody and doesn't describe any real behavior issue, just is suspicious about what's going on, and then subsequently the resistance and that kind of stuff gets thrown in there and complicates things. But in the beginning, there wasn't any really good lawful reason for that person to be showing ID and answering questions and that kind of stuff in the first place.
Correct. Yeah. And it was them not complying that ended up ultimately getting him arrested. And I see that. And it's awful. Right. I really think they need to redo the whole R&O statute, if you ask me. A 2-year felony for failure to comply with the lawful command is ridiculous. I've seen it charged where someone's getting a blood draw for a suspected drugged driving, and they go to shrug their arm when they see the needle. And they actually then go back and grab their arm to hold it down so the needle can go in. And that's like an involuntary sort of response for some people that you see a needle, you might flinch at first, but that could be a 2-year felony. And Michigan really needs to take a look at that law. That law covers, if I were to wound a police officer, it would be the same charge as shrugging my arm during a blood draw here in Michigan.
Hey, Josh, explain what R&O means. You mentioned that phrase.
Resisting and obstructing. That's the statute that that covers a lot of different things. It's a 2-year felony or high court misdemeanor, and that's where we get that failure to comply with the lawful command.
And yeah, but then that follows, like that all follows the original unlawful encounter. That is so frustrating, you know, as part of that whole process. I mean,
But even if it's a lawful encounter, I mean, just a traffic stop where you get stopped. As soon as I drive a car that's in my wife's name, because if I drive a plated car with my name and they run my plate, they pull me out as a felony stop and make me get on the ground with guns drawn before they tell me why they pulled me over. So I at least like a fighting chance. I don't have cars registered to me, but as soon as I hand them my driver's license, I know that it's a matter of minutes before his attitude changes. At which point I've had guys walk up to me and say, "Mr. Brook, any weapons in the car?" I'm still trying to figure out why I got pulled over. He wants to know if there's any weapons in the car. I don't know of any weapons in the car, so I say no. At which point he asks if he can search my car. I mean, we're already gone down a path that I don't want to go down, because he's not going to find any weapons. He may find a bag of weed I lost a long time ago, but that's no longer a problem. At one point, that was a real problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, at this point, I comply. I comply to the point that I get sick on the roadside because they're abusing my rights. But if I stand up to them, it's just going to make things more difficult. And it's because they read what their computer screen told them. And it says, because of my felony convictions, I have an officer safety caution and weapons are involved. At which point, it's all about their safety. And I generally, when we meet, first thing I do is let them know that we're both going home tonight. So, you know, I'm not here to fight with you. I'm unsteady on my feet. If you ask me to walk around, please give me some space. But I'm one of those persons that complies to the chagrin of my lawyer sometimes. But it's so much easier to comply with these unlawful orders than it is to fight with these people.
Yep. And in truth, we all have to make that decision based on our own physical condition and our own knowledge of the law. But Josh, sometimes complying at the moment gives an attorney like yourself the leverage that you need later on in order to overturn whatever potential charges might be levied. Because once an officer does something that's kind of sketchy and they get away with it, they do more sketchy stuff. And then the stop becomes a little bit more, actionable and defendable, right?
Yeah. Generally, when it comes to, like, let's say searching a car, I would always rather go into it as far as an attorney with my client not consenting, and that leaves the officer to establish reasonable suspicion that there was something in the car. So maybe in Adam's situation, if they were to find something, we could show that there wasn't reasonable suspicion, that just because there was a crime in the past doesn't mean in this given moment there's anything that, suspicion would be unreasonable. But I get what Adam's saying is that they're probably going to search either way, right? Because then it's just easier sometimes to go along with it. But from a legal perspective, I have much more to work with arguing that they didn't have reasonable suspicion, especially now that cannabis is legal, if we're talking about cannabis issues and things like that, because the smell, doesn't provide necessarily reasonable suspicion of possession anymore. There could be some factors that would lead an officer to believe possibly that someone's under the influence if they're the only one in the car and it's a recent sort of burnt marijuana smell, or they see smoke coming out of the car. Maybe, but for the most part, evidence of marijuana is no longer a crime and no longer something that provides reasonable suspicion.
Right. Josh, have you seen an uptick in cannabis criminal-based scenarios going on? Some other attorneys have said that they're aware of more action, more enforcement stuff that's been happening.
I'd say the last couple months, maybe a little bit. But it's still well below anything, pre-2018.
Right.
Pretty small. But I have seen I did get, I recently got contacted about someone who was raided in Michigan, a caregiver. And that's something that I very rarely, get called about anymore. So that was kind of surprised. And that's just in the last week or so. And then I always have seen a somewhat steady amount of drugged driving cases, but I represent people all across the state of Michigan. So that's kind of like on a statewide basis. I don't necessarily have like one spot where I see people, getting in trouble more so than any time in the last couple of years.
Right. And what's going on with the driving thing in cannabis? What kind of actions happening there?
Yeah, it really got kind of, police officers arrest people still for it. Just if they seem to think they smell it or find marijuana in the car or something like that. So people get arrested for it. I would say most of the time prosecuting attorneys take a relatively reasonable approach. I recently had a case that was involved operating under the influence causing death. And the prosecuting attorney, after listening to some things that we had to say, decided to just prosecute it as a moving violation causing death, which is a 1-year misdemeanor. And I think that's certainly, although the THC may have been in the blood, that my client wasn't under the influence, it certainly wasn't the cause of the accident. It simply was an accident. And there was a moving violation. So we got a really reasonable result in that. That's what I would have been hoping for at trial, would have been a moving violation causing death, which is a 1-year misdemeanor versus a 15-year felony. And that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, before 2018. My client was a medical patient, but still, I don't think it would have happened. I've picked a few juries since on drug driving cases since 2018. And I remember the first time I did it, the jurors just opened up and started talking about cannabis. And this was in Hudsonville, Michigan, one of the most conservative areas in Michigan, over in Ottawa County. And I had, retired people on there saying, oh, yeah, my buddy smokes cannabis and he uses it medically. And then we go golf together and I'll get in the car with him right afterwards. And these were jurors. And it was amazing. The prosecuting attorney started kicking off jurors, but ran out of challenges and couldn't kick any more off. And we had a cannabis friendly jury. And this is in like the most conservative county in Michigan. And I didn't see that before because I think people were scared to talk about it. But now they're like, and then they this is the cool part. They see the first person talk about it and that person gets kicked off the jury. So they were like, oh, I can do the same thing and get kicked off the jury and go home, which is fine because I want them all to start talking that way because they can only get so many off, And yeah, so it's a different world when it comes to those types of cases. I haven't had to do a lot of trials because most of them have been resolved in a pretty reasonable fashion. I had a case up in Ironwood in the UP this summer where the prosecuting attorney called me up a week before trial and said, looks like we're playing a game of chicken and you won. I'm dismissing the case. I had a shitty case. And just straight up front with me, he dismissed it. We didn't go to trial, but they were hoping that we would plea, and they figure out that that's not what I'm hired for. If I get hired on a drug driving case, we're going to get a good resolution or go to trial, one or the other. That's just the way it works. I don't get hired to take a visibly impaired offer, especially if I'm going all the way up to Ironwood, So anyway, we called the bluff, and they knew they had a shitty case. They were just assuming we would plea at one point, and once they realized we weren't and it got close to trial and they had to do work, they were like, yeah, I'm going to reconsider. I've done a lot of drunk driving cases when I started my career. That doesn't happen in alcohol cases. They will take it to trial every time, even if it's a crappy case. With cannabis, it's different, and that's good. I think that's the way it should be.
Josh, why do you think prosecutors are like that? Why do you think they differentiate between punishing alcohol different than cannabis? Do they recognize one's more harmful than the other?
Certainly, and they realize jurors do too. And they realize the science isn't there. There is no limits. With an alcohol case, they can point to a sheet of paper and say, look, you're above a 0.08, you're guilty. Done. And it's hard to defend. With cannabis, that I tell the jury, this piece of paper is meaningless. It just simply shows my client used cannabis sometime in the past.
Josh, can you go over what the law is pertaining to roadside testing and all that, since we're actually talking about it? Do you have to submit? And as a lawyer, would you tell your client not to?
The swab thing you're talking about?
I would not submit to any of it.
If they ask you to do a sobriety test and you haven't drank alcohol, you wouldn't do it either, right?
I would not. No.
That's the follow my
Any of that.
finger, walk the line, all that stuff. That's the sobriety test you would refuse right off the bat.
Those are just all hocus pocus, if you ask me.
Right.
I've seen those conducted by the instructors that teach the officers.
Right.
And he taught it to a room full of attorneys, and we had all been together all day. Nobody was intoxicated. He performed it on us as a group, and almost everyone failed in his opinion. And that's because these tests aren't made to show whether or not someone's truly intoxicated or not. They're there to give officers evidence of intoxication
More
in every
fuel.
case.
Yeah.
Every case.
Another tool.
Creating
as
tests
they
which are
call it.
likely to fail,
Yeah.
so that they can say you failed something, right?
Yeah, and they do them wrong. They interpret them wrong. I mean, it's just not a good situation. You're only helping them out.
Right. Hey, Josh, with some time that we have left, because I know you are busy, we wanted to get to GLEN a little bit. We've talked about that. Great Lakes Expungement Network, which I know you are a big part of and doing a lot of work. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe Josie's been around there today with Brenda and others doing some work.
Hey, can I ask one quick question? I was on mute trying to ask this 3 times.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim. Yeah,
Oh, sorry. On what grounds are you able to deny anything on this? I mean, I know if they're going to ask questions, it's, I'm going to plead my fifth. But for a pullover, what do you say in that situation?
Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, I wouldn't answer any questions about whether or not you've been using substances, whether or not you have a medical card, when the last time you used was. I wouldn't submit to any standardized field sobriety tests. I wouldn't submit to any roadside sobriety chemical testing. The only time I would submit to testing is after I've been arrested. And at that point, there's what's called evidentiary breath or blood tests. And those you could, there's more severe consequences for refusing those. Up to that point, you're only looking at monetary fines for refusing some of those. And so I always
It's civil infractions?
just
Okay.
civil infractions. There's no points on your license. You just pay a fine. And it's a reasonable fine. So I just say pay the fines. Don't give them any evidence, because that gives me the opportunity when we go to court to argue what did they have for what probable cause did they have for the arrest. And if it's simply I smelled marijuana, but you didn't admit to using it, you didn't take any tests, that's not going to be probable cause. And I could get the judge to then throw out any evidence collected after your arrest, which would include your blood test, etc., and your case could essentially go away.
Cool. The least you say, the less they have to work with to build anything.
But then if they arrest you, then you should submit to the testing, because the consequences are worse.
Yeah, the consequences are losing your license for 1 year, even if you end up beating the criminal case. And those are pretty severe consequences for most people. At that point, I would submit, but I could still challenge it because you didn't consent. I would challenge the search warrant and what's in that to suppress the blood. Or you would still argue there's no probable cause as well for the original arrest.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Your future honor.
Oh, I don't know about that.
We'll
That's
see.
not something I want to do.
Hey man, tell us about GLEN. We talked about it on the show a lot. I'm part of it. We know Josie is. We know how it formed originally between Redemption and Sons and Daughters coming together on a project, and it became its own entity. And you are like the main legal counsel and on the board of this group. And I think there's been some work done on it today over there with Josie and others. So give us a little update.
Yeah, it's going great. Josie's here today working on some GLEN projects here at the office, her and Brenda, and one of our interns. And so what GLEN is the Great Lakes Expungement Network, and we're providing free expungements to people here in Michigan that have a qualifying marijuana conviction. And if they qualify, we'll work to get any of their eligible convictions expunged. And so we have a team of attorneys throughout the state that work with us, and we provide the attorney, we provide the filing fees, we help them get their fingerprints done, we get the court records for them. Really, it's a pretty simple process, and we can hopefully get a lot of people across the state of Michigan with clean records, and that's our goal.
And then I know we've come across some things where the the way that the charges or the convictions went down, there's a way, sometimes you have to go through a time period where you can get something off at one point and wait a little bit longer in order to be eligible to get more things. And there's a process that goes along with that for some people, depending on the circumstances. But this last package of bills has allowed for some of that, where a lot of that stuff wouldn't even have been possible before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, in the past, if you had anything more than one felony, you wouldn't be eligible. And so it's not perfect, and there are a lot of people that still aren't eligible that certainly should be, but it did open up the doors for a tremendous amount of people that otherwise wouldn't have qualified. And like I mentioned, the one felony, if you had anything more, would disqualify you, or if you had more than 2 misdemeanors, you were disqualified from the previous expungement bills. So this really opened it up and provided help to a lot of people that previously weren't eligible for expungement. There's also the marijuana misdemeanor expungement program, which is great, and that provides for a real easy process to get marijuana misdemeanors expunged. And that's filing just a couple pages of paper, no fingerprints. And the prosecuting attorney, if they don't file an objection, it goes through automatically and you don't even have to go to court. So that's another great provision that's new here in Michigan. And so I think the clean slate package of bills helped a lot. It made things better, but it wasn't by any means a perfect set of bills, which, you know.
Well, a lot of the marijuana one, a lot of us take a little bit of issue with because it didn't include all the behavior, all the activity that's allowable under the MRTMA, and a lot of those small time misdemeanors of possession or use or whatever, we thought should just been automatically wiped off. Not even the process that you just described.
I agree. Yeah, and like for instance, improper transport, which shouldn't have ever been a charge for someone because the Court of Appeals determined that was people were protected by Section 4 of the Medical Marijuana Act from that conviction, but that's not an eligible misdemeanor to get expunged. That's not one of the ones that's listed in the bill, and I don't know if it was oversight or whatever, but that one certainly should be automatically expunged for
everything. I 100% agree. Now, just for clarity though, that one will get expunged after 7 years, as long as there hasn't been other legal issues in between and that type of stuff. So that's there.
As long as you don't catch more misdemeanors.
Right. Yeah, you can't do anything in between those
time periods. And you have to understand that these prosecutors know this nonsense and have known it for a long time. And it was not uncommon to charge you with 2 felonies, convict you of both, give you a sentence that was concurrent, and now you're doing time for basically 1 felony, and you've got 2 on your record, and you'll never be expungible.
Yep.
And the prosecutors knew that, and all they were doing was caring about getting you on those 2 felonies so that you were a felon. And it's a game that the prosecutors play. And I'm happy this is cleaning some of it up, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I would like to see crimes coming out of a marijuana search warrant gone. I wouldn't be a felon if it wasn't for that. They used marijuana to get into my house. And I'm not expungible because of the way this silliness works. So, whatever. We got a long way to go.
It's true. There's holes in this whole thing. It's better, but it's
better.
Yeah. But it's
doesn't cover what we said at the time. If you remember, the portion of the Clean Slate initiative that covered cannabis was written by a Republican legislator who didn't really want cannabis to be included, but he thought since his constituents said yes, he would write a bill. It was weak to begin with, and there was never much incentive to improve it. Senator Jeff Irwin certainly tried in committee to get better with it, and we did improve it to some degree, but my fear is that it may be a while before we get a better correction. But Great Lakes Expungement Network is really kind of leveling the playing field for some of those folks who qualify but couldn't necessarily afford the service, Josh, right?
Yeah, and it's not that. Also, we're just trying to get the message out there about the whole expungement process, because I think previously a lot of people that even were eligible under the program didn't know they were eligible, right? And so part of our message is to let people know about these bills. So, and then if they are eligible, we want to help them out, So I think that's a big part of it, is just getting that message out there. And so if anybody knows a friend that had an old marijuana possession, make sure to mention to them that, hey, you can get that expunged, and have them call us at the Great Lakes Expungement Network.
Yeah, right on. Hey, Justin, anything else you want to leave us with? It's just about time for us to move on to the next segment here. Where people can reach you for any service that you might provide, any other bit of information you think needs to be included before we move on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've got the website, micannabislawyers.com, and you can get in contact with us there. Or you can call the office at 517-512-8364. I do a lot of cannabis criminal defense. And then here at the office, we do family law that involves cannabis issues, and then also a lot of trademarks and business licensing work, etc. So if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and give us a call at the Michigan Cannabis Lawyers.
Right on. And just appreciate a lot of stuff that you do and the approach that you take, and it's really good for this entire community. Definitely very, very appreciated.
Well, thank you.
All right, Josh. Thanks a lot, man.
Take care, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Another great Jazz Cabbage interview. We really are delivering the goods for our viewers this last couple of weeks.
Well, the people who care about rights and people, and we have to move right into our next segment as we are joined by Pontiac City Council candidate Mikal Goodman and Leah. Leah, what is Leah is running this campaign in some direction, directing this campaign, whatever the title is. She's doing something with it, and also is the chair of the Young Democrats of Michigan too. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. But this is mainly about this campaign right now. We'd like to highlight people seeking elected seats in local government and find out where their views are on cannabis and what's going on at those localities and that type of stuff. So Leah, why don't you actually let us know what's going on with this campaign and introduce Mikal?
Yeah, most definitely. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sweet. I was having some weird mic issues earlier. So I am super honored to get introduced to Mikal Goodman. He is a dear friend of mine. He's vice chair of the Young Democrats of Michigan. He's part of local Pontiac organizations, local Oakland County, the greater statewide organizations, and he's been fighting the good fight for a long time. And now he's running to change Pontiac and progress it forward. And he's running for District 3 for City Council. He's a lifelong Pontiac resident, and he really wants to see the life brought back into the city and see it a thriving and enjoyable community where he can raise his future family in it. So with that being said, I'd love for you guys to get to know Mikal today.
Right on. Welcome.
Hi. I will say that Leah did give me an excellent introduction there. That happens when you know someone for the greater part of plus over 2 years.
Yeah.
Plus serving on a board, so it's best introduction I could possibly ask for.
Right on. So just getting right at it. So cannabis is an issue in Pontiac.
Yes, it is.
Stuff going on with the businesses and whatever else is happening at large. I mean, if you want to discuss some of the circumstances with policing there, the last few years, the sheriff's department has covered that ground because the police force hasn't been funded. The local department. Yeah.
So to touch on that, Pontiac hasn't had a Pontiac police department since I was a child. So for a long time, we've been contracting from the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. So they have been the main policing force in the state of Pontiac for the greater part of, if not over a decade. But yeah, no, Pontiac has a real issue when it comes to marijuana in the city. And it's mainly surrounding the medical marijuana ordinance, businesses, and so on and so forth. And that's really the main issue that's been happening. I take it that everyone here at least has somewhat heard of the different things that have happened in Pontiac just since we've attempted to pass medical marijuana dispensary ordinance within the city. From everything of applications not being done for months, if not over a year. The lawsuit that happened between the people who were trying to buy the Greenwood Plaza for a grocery store / dispensary grower facility, and the near impending lawsuit regarding that and the damages that might be sought for that. And regardless, so there's a lot of things happening in the city where it's to put it simply, the people of Pontiac voted for medical marijuana dispensaries within the city of Pontiac in 2018. It passed by one vote, but it still passed regardless. And we are now going into, we're almost going to be going into 2022, and there is not a single dispensary in the city of Pontiac. That's a problem.
Yeah.
That is a problem. That is nearly an entire term of people being in office, and nothing has really happened. And that leads me to ask a lot of questions, whether people are trying hard enough, or, you know, what things are happening behind the scenes that simply need to be changed because people, like, our system was not built to handle marijuana, even though it's not that difficult of a process to do. But a lot of people who are currently in these positions aren't exactly in favor of it to begin with. So there's no rush for them. And we begin to see, like, on the local level, a lot of these different circumstances where the people are being somewhat screwed over simply because the people in power aren't doing what's necessary or what's expected of them, and trying to kick the can down the road as far as humanly possible. And that's how we end up where we are currently, where you look at Pontiac and then you hear nothing positive regarding marijuana or cannabis anywhere in Pontiac whatsoever.
So I started bringing up a little bit about Oakland County, because when it comes to, like, and those business issues are out there, and I am aware of them, and I know that just in conversation anyway, I shouldn't say I know, but I was told that, like, the group suing really tried for a long time to resolve this by having conversations, by really trying to work it out with the decision makers and others before getting to this point. And they really had to be pushed there. It took a long time, so there was a lot of resistance there. But also concerned about how kind of individual rights and caregiver rights are looked at in the locality too. There's a problem around the state with policy changes trying to restrict caregiver activity and limit what they can do sometimes, like just in their own home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of stuff. And I kind of was making leading to that a little bit by being concerned that it's the Oakland County Sheriff's Department that polices the area, because they have a history of really being horrible on this issue. And just wondering what policies are in terms of that, individual rights, caregiver rights, that type of thing. Is as far as you know, are there specific issues with that?
So, to be very honest, I'm not the most knowledgeable cannabis policy in general. It's not really my main house. Haven't been able to legally smoke for that long. Turned 21 this year. So a lot of my work focuses on things outside of cannabis. So I really lean on, like, Leah and Zahara a lot for that. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, to put it simply, my stances on these things is we should be doing everything we can to benefit and protect caregivers. Because as far as I'm concerned, we should not be letting businesses monopolize on on marijuana, when we all have seen what has happened over decades of over policing, the war on drugs, disenfranchising people of color, and then now creating an industry solely out of the thing that we have thrown them in jail for constantly. So even moving beyond that, the purpose of making sure that people themselves are able to grow in the safety of their own house for whatever purposes that they need to, whether it be personal or in a caregiving capacity. We need to do everything that we can to protect that, and not let these big cannabis companies completely screw over the market and all the people who actually need it, especially the patients themselves, who heavily depend on the caregiver network that we have here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Hey, good answer.
There you go. Where can we donate to your campaign?
Well, I mean, we'll drop it now. It's www.mikalforpontiac.com. The donate link is right there. But yeah, I mean, again, luckily for me, having friends like Leah and Zahara and hearing about these things constantly, it allows me to pick up a decent amount of information, although I may not be super knowledgeable about it. It's kind of just from a place of what are the best positions to protect the people who don't have money, who don't have power. And we begin to recognize very early on that letting companies and businesses monopolize on an industry that has been used to hurt entire groups of people is a problem. So we need to do everything that we can to keep that from happening.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick and say that for our audio only listeners on Spotify, Alexa, and all of our podcasting network, that's Mikal, MIKAL Pontiac, correct?
Yep.
MikalforPontiac.com for that donation link.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
So, I mean, obviously, Pontiac is one of the cities that could with a well thought out approach towards social equity, could take advantage of this, lots of different ways and could really benefit from it. And like Detroit, struggling with trying to put that together. I mean, they have some stuff that had some teeth, but there are some constitutional issues with it and that kind of stuff. But man, it would be a great city to embrace this.
Pontiac could beat Detroit at this if they embraced it right now.
So
They're that ready to go in Pontiac compared to Detroit.
So I'll even make the argument. So using anecdotal experience from myself, I do smoke cannabis. I drive to dispensaries that are not anywhere near me because I refuse to pay overpriced Oakland County prices. And a lot of that is because we're allowing these dispensaries to pop up in places like Walled Lake, like in Ferndale, like in Royal Oak, where the population of people who live there can afford these things. And of course, it's going to put money in whoever's pockets have those businesses there. So, but then we look towards Pontiac, where let's just go on cost of living. People here cannot afford to go to the dispensary the same way that other people do. So that's issue number one. So let's go on cost and access. But also, we have to again recognize that marijuana is the reason why many Black and brown people, especially in the city of Pontiac, have been inside the carceral system at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do everything that we can. Now that we have allowed it to be legal and we're now allowing people to profit off of it, we need to be able to start rebuilding these communities with the money that will come from now legalized cannabis to help rebuild these communities that were destroyed by the same exact drug that was policed by our county sheriffs, by our state law enforcement, by federal.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that's making sure that Black and brown people from within the city, first of all, are being able to be a part of the industry. Mm-hmm. That's the very first key thing, and also making sure that whatever businesses aren't from the city of Pontiac are actually kind of required to get put back into the community. Because the last thing that I want to see happen is we have let's say 20 dispensaries in the city of Pontiac, which is what they're aiming for, and let's say that we have 18 of them not owned by people in the city. Where is the money going? Because it's not coming here. It's not coming to the people who I have to walk down the street and see at the gas station, who would have maybe loved to get into this and do something for their community, be able to profit off of something that, again, has hurt their community for so long, not because of the drug itself, but because of how society has treated them and us. So making sure that we make the process and the industry and getting into everything that's happening as equitable as possible for the people who have been affected by it most. That's the key and bottom line.
And you mentioned you mentioned medical marijuana places haven't been open yet. Is the city opted into and looking at policy for MRTMA or adult use places also, or is this just talking about medical at this point?
So what we're discussing right now is kind of what's happening with medical only. Now they're and again, I may be a little bit wrong on this. I know there's a couple ordinances, I believe, too, focusing on trying to, I believe, increase the amount of dispensaries allowed in the city of Pontiac, as well as one that's trying to move us towards recreational.
Well, at that point, then there is a revenue share for each. Each place represents a unit of share. In the excise from the excise tax. And that's one way, at least, that the money comes back into the community.
And they're talking 20 dispensaries already, right? Isn't that you said that's what they're looking at now? Is 20?
Yes, currently it's 20 dispensaries. I believe it's 5 in each overlay district. I know there's for a fact one in my district itself, which is if I win Cesar Chavez. There's a downtown overlay, a Walden overlay, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. But to
that'd
bring
be
on
$500,000 right back to the city. from the state. Just in the,
Yeah, well, that's the
I don't
thing
know
is,
how they don't embrace that everywhere. I've never figured that out.
well, that
20
kind of
dispensaries in Pontiac would be awesome.
Yeah.
well, that kind of goes down to like the fact that there is still such a large stigma around cannabis and marijuana, because this is again a Black community that has been over policed and oppressed due to the entire war on drugs. So a lot of the people who are a little bit older have a very strong feeling against cannabis, and that, you know, and I don't want to say it infects everything, but it kind of does. It does exactly that, and it makes these discussions and these fights much harder. I've had to have discussion with people on doors or out in like, you know, public areas, specifically, you know, kind of confronting me about cannabis, and it's being able to combat the misinformation that goes around it. A lot of time I hear the conversation of, oh, well, people who smoke all the time, they're lazy, they're not capable of working, so on and so forth. And it's like, that's not true. None of that is true. And it's we have been propagated so much to believe that we have let it infect basic conversations around facts.
It doesn't create a motivational syndrome. It's not a gateway drug. The list goes on, but these things are still, still a part of the conversation for a lot of people. I agree.
Hey, reefer madness is alive and well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
But it's going away. It's going away because you walk down the grocery store aisles and you see cannabis leaves on like cereal and granola now, and that's all changing. So.
Shampoo.
Yeah, but the reefer madness.
Yeah, you see a lot of him.
But the community he's talking
it.
that Mikal
I'm
was
just talking about the reefer madness, the crazy stuff, the stuff where, you know, if we go to any religious organization, I don't care who you want to pick on today. If you go to any religious organization and you gather their elders, and we're going to hear nonsense about marijuana that, you know, is just offensive, and it's because they really believe in this, what I refer to as this reefer madness. It's they've been told something for so long, they have no evidence of it, and you know, there are no bodies stacked up anywhere. And they truly believe that one of two things: either they were lied to and they're embarrassed and they can't come forward, or they really believe this stuff. And I believe that they believe it, and they just take it and they spew it. And it's our job to confront it. The problem is when it's your grandmother and her friends, you're not going to say anything because she'll hit you.
Well, it's all going on. What Jim is saying is correct. We're moving forward incrementally, but there's still this group of people that have just, as Adam says, have just internalized this wrong information on cannabis, and it's unlearning stuff or being even willing to or entertaining the idea in the first place is a difficult place to get to.
Yeah, those are hard conversations.
From brainwashing. Deprogramming from brainwashing is what it is.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that it's even worse in the Black community, speaking from experience. Because of like there is a level of like self-preservation that kind of comes into it, because I would argue that a lot of it's, you know, the propagation that happened with reefer madness and, you know, DARE and all those things, but also like the self-preservation of wanting their family to remain not in prison, because the last thing that you wanted was your kid to get, you know, sent to prison for years. Right. So that makes it even worse, as like it's our community trying to protect our own, but in doing so, we're still spreading misinformation that's damaging to actually solving the issue. And sometimes I make the argument to people, because, you know, when we discuss cannabis, one of the easy arguments that you can make is like, okay, well, if cannabis is a problem, then what about people drinking? People drinking causes much more harm, whether it becomes health, car accidents, domestic violence, all these different things. So either ban alcohol, the thing that's actually causing a lot of damage, and you can, you know, still be pissy and, you know, get rid of cannabis and not want it, or legalize it and regulate it, since you have such a fucking problem with it. But the answer is not, oh, well, we just shouldn't do it at all. We have seen what cannabis is capable of doing medically to benefit people. The safe recreational use that can be done with it compared to other drugs. At this point, it's a tradition. It's a tradition of hating cannabis.
It is
like that's what it boils down to.
We can see medically what alcohol does to damage people too.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's hard to weed that stuff out, as he's saying, so to speak. Even though the evidence is obvious, cannabis isn't causing problems that alcohol is. These same people, embrace alcohol is okay.
And don't forget that
cannabis.
Don't forget that for the last 80 years, 70 years, they had science and technology and everything on their side. You couldn't find anything that said that there was anything positive about cannabis. You could only find things.
Yeah, the CDC's
the negative.
CDC's mission was to find out what was bad about it. It wasn't like find out about it. It was find out what's bad about it.
So it's only the modern era where we actually have the, and I use this all the time. I believe there's a difference between cannabis culture and marijuana culture. And I believe that we're living in the era of cannabis culture where if you don't understand the medical values of cannabis, then you're just a, troglodyte or something. I mean, you're just, you're way out of touch. And if you can't accept it, okay. My problem is when you want to criminalize any part of it, you want to put some human being in a cage because they involve themselves in ounces, grams, tons. I don't care how much.
And I mean, and to make it even worse, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's cognitive dissonance at this point. It's pure cognitive dissonance. There's so much information at this point that shows the positive and medical benefits of cannabis. And at this point, it's just, again, I feel like it's just a pastime for some people, or it's just a fear of not wanting to be wrong. There's multiple different things that are added into where it's just like the information, despite how factual it is, will just not reach some people in the way that, unless they want to understand it at some point.
When they internalize the other stuff, it's hard to change that. It's hard to alter that. As Rick was saying, you have to deprogram somebody who's been brainwashed. That's a difficult position to get.
Repetition is the key to retention in advertising, and what they did with the drug war is repetition over and over and over. They pump those. This is your brain on drugs. We even made jokes about this is your brain on drugs, which actually kind of still reinforce the primary message of the original marketing ploy, which is Nancy Reagan and all that. But you can't blame some people who in their elder years may not have the mental agility to be able to shut off some of that programming. Part of the systematic problem that we have is that we have so many people making decisions that have probably passed the age of mental agility. And I know it's difficult as a society for us to say at a certain age or whatever, you're probably no longer eligible to make decisions for the community as a whole. But man, that's sort of where we're at this point, right? When we look at all the different issues, socially, environmentally, even financially, sometimes those old school attitudes ignore all the benefits the modern world brings, and it really puts us at a disadvantage locally, on a state level, and as a nation.
And also, let us not forget the amount of people that exist in office on all levels who do benefit and profit off of the jailing of poor and Black and brown people. That is a very key part of that as well. So, like, that's the issue. There are also too many people who hold positions of power who benefit off of people being oppressed. And that includes oppressing people off of the most minor thing, which is the use of cannabis.
Well, did you guys hear recently about some bill that's out there to fine like congressional members for lying? You guys hear about that?
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, but it would be amazing if it did.
Yeah. Let's start with the local police. Come on.
That's one of the things we've had a conversation with both last week and this week with the criminal defense attorneys. And what we talked about is how the police can intentionally mislead you at the roadside. We also talked about the smell of cannabis should no longer be reason for any search or any additional investigation. But we know that not all police are as enlightened as we are on this program, and not everybody plays by the same playbook. So we're still very much at risk, even though we've gotten all of these progresses.
Yeah, it's different every county you go to. It's like, you know,
Right.
you cross county lines and like, so I'm in Washtenaw County where we have Prosecutor Savitt and, you know, he's super progressive on this, but
Right.
I cross into like Macomb and it's completely different. You cross into like Monroe, it's completely different. You go further up north and it's completely different. So like, we've made progress, but like, it's different everywhere that you're at. And I wish it was kind of more like universal protection.
It used to be even a lot different. There were
Yeah.
some things that have happened now, with statewide law that has created
But
a more of a
we have
cohesive
heard
state
about-
policy. But go ahead, Matt, I'm sorry.
we have heard about these multi-jurisdictional task force that still exist in some of these outlying counties. I know that, and one of the things that bothers me about Oakland County Sheriff's Department being what I consider an occupying force in Pontiac is that, you know, these cats have a narcotics enforcement team. They have their own SWAT team. They behave like the sheriff should in a county. He's the top dog, but they don't need to do what they do. They could turn it down a few notches, you know.
And I was wondering, Mikal, I agree with that, and especially in this county's history with this issue. Oftentimes, if you're on council and the decision-making body of the community, that includes kind of directing local police on some policies and the way to approach certain things, and having some kind of control over the which way they swing on certain things or whatever. But having the agreement to have the county sheriff there, is there still that ability for the local decision makers to set the tone with those people, or is it all just what they want to do?
Well, to be very clear, Pontiac contracts the county sheriff.
Right. That's a financial thing.
So there are things that could be done if people wanted to get them done. Key point being want to. I hold the position, and I'm very public with this when it comes to I'm running for office because I want to make change, but also two, by being an elected official, you can make a lot of noise that's necessary. Because at a certain point, I'm elected for 4 years. For 4 years, you're going to hear me yell and complain about the things that you have failed to fix, things that you have failed to do on behalf of the people. And one of those things is making sure for the next 4 years after I get elected, because I do feel very confident about that, is making sure that I'm loudly in the people's favor when it comes to everything from like my main campaign points being housing, roads, infrastructure, and jobs, but also talking, really fighting against the overcriminalization of non-violent offenses, whether it be drug use or whether it be immigration. Because one of my positions that I have is like not working with ICE. So by being in council, one of the things that I can easily do is hold the people who we technically are hiring accountable, whether it be whether it be changing the terms of their contract in some way, or just making sure that they're not destroying our community. And like, now let me give the Oakland County Sheriff some credit in the city of Pontiac. A lot of people here do like the Oakland County Sheriff being here. And it may be due to many different things, whether it's not having our own police force, not really having anything in the city, but also, I mean, there has been some work by the county sheriff to kind of be hospitable to the city of Pontiac. However, we cannot let that nice relationship that we have cloud the things that actually need to be changed. Right. So in hopefully being elected is making sure that despite them being here and people liking them, we need to hold them accountable for the things that they do here in the city that affect our residents. Because at the end of the day, it's the people who are elected and the people who live in the city who have to hold them accountable. And that's really the end of the conversation. Either you do or you don't. And if you're elected, you kind of need to. It's part of your fucking job.
Right. But so often, and I trust that will be your approach when you get in there. And we've seen it with Ellie Savitt too. Mm-hmm. But quite often we hear prospective candidates talk about all the things they're going to do once they get into, their position, and then find out that the challenges or the image that they had or mm-hmm. whatever the circumstances are is different. And that doesn't actually totally come to fruition, and they become more of a part of the machine that's already in existence there.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing that I've watched with people who I personally have really been excited for when it comes to running for office. But But there's a couple of things that we have to look at when it comes to me personally. I guess this is kind of like me making a personal exception for why I don't think it'll happen to me. I come from no political background in Pontiac. I don't have a political family. I have no name. I'm 21 years old. This is a poor person's campaign, and I happily say that. I take no money from any big businesses or corporations anywhere here in the city, because as a 21-year-old who has watched my city be screwed over so many different times by people who have money, by the people who have power, I have recognized that that's the exact opposite of what we need. We need people here who fully understand the opposite end of power. And that's the key point. I've watched my stepdad be arrested and treated horribly by the police for open carrying a gun that he legally had. I've watched people, be assaulted and, be thrown in jail for, again, having cannabis, not even distributing, but personal use. So when we see these different things happen to people over the course of entire childhood and adolescence, you realize things very fast and very early on. And I recognized very early on that for things to change, there has to be someone who has understood the negative side of power to then fight back against it in a wholehearted, aggressive fashion. And I say that because at a certain point, we cannot continue to hope and have faith in the system to change without people actively doing the hard work, whether or not it keeps them from being reelected, but fighting for change with every fiber of their being. Right. That's what we need. And as a 21-year-old black man who teaches in the city, who has spent almost every waking moment here trying to fight for a better life for me and my family, I feel that I am one of the best people to do that.
Nice.
Yeah, that is nice. That's very genuine too. I feel it, man. I think that is the case. I think you get in there, you're going to look for change and start effectuating it. And I hope that the voters of Pontiac follow suit. Is there any kind of is there a prognosis on what's going on with the race? Did the primaries already took place?
So my race didn't have a primary. It's just me versus the incumbent, the 12-year incumbent, who believes that every issue in the city of Pontiac can be summed up in essentially 2 words, blight and crime. So you can already guess how her philosophy is towards handling city politics. So I'm running against a 12-year incumbent, and it's just me and her. So there was no primary. However, as Leah knows, I was at a primary day all day long, from sunrise to sunset. But my election will be decided in November. Okay. And from what I'm hearing on doors and on phone calls, as I was telling Leah earlier, people sound ready for change. I've received a lot of positive responses, especially with people feeling very negatively about my opponent and feeling very happy to see a younger, knowledgeable black man running for a seat in a city that is made up a majority minority, who has a younger population. The average age of Pontiac is in its mid to late 30s, whereas the youngest person on our council is 38.
There you go.
So you recognize that there needs to be some generational shift for things to begin to happen here.
Right.
Yeah. How long was your incumbent in office? I'm sorry.
So she has been in office since 2009.
12 years, you said.
12 years.
12 years.
And it's still talking about blight.
Yep.
Time to go. Yeah, so no
problem.
Fix it in the last decade, apparently.
Well, it doesn't help that, well, let me rephrase this. Her response makes a lot of sense for her philosophy when you consider that she has what is considered to be one of the most dangerous apartment complexes in the city of Pontiac. I don't feel that way. However, if you begin to look at how she analyzes the world and apply it to the things that exist in her district, the different apartment complexes that exist here that are majority low income and of color, it makes a lot of sense. And again, it's one of those things where this is not meant to be a race issue, right? I truly give a crap less that an older white lady has been representing this district, because people are very capable of doing jobs that they know how society works. However, when you believe that every problem in the city in the past 12 years solely is around people not being respectable enough to go get jobs in the city, or that, like, there's a transportation problem and people should be able to get there if they can get anywhere else. So having those pull yourself up by the bootstrap mentality to every single problem is an issue. And that's really why I'm running against her, is because like at a certain point you can't keep electing the same person and expecting some change, something different from them, because it will not happen.
Look, if they've been in office for 12 years and they have the same problems they had when they started office, they've been an ineffective leader.
And you know what? And I'll say this to you, Mikal. If you were in the same situation after 12 years, you shouldn't be reelected either.
No. So,
but that's the difference, is that you know that you and your generation in 12 years can do a lot more. Because you have that energy and that drive,
and the real knowledge of the things that need to be changed. When you talk about
that are going to make a difference.
I mean, that's such a common story. People, the cop comes across somebody with a gun. People are allowed to have guns. The cop's got no reason to believe that that's an illegal possession. Yet they force the issue and want somebody to prove it, and then that turns into an investigation and whatever else unfolds, and it becomes a mess. And it was unlawful just to get started with.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. There are a lot of rights that exist in our country. Unfortunately, those rights do not apply to people who are poor or black and brown. A lot of people we have the right to bear arms, but unless you are a person of color, as we've seen happen multiple times. But back to one of the things that we said earlier about, if I was elected for 12 years and haven't done anything, you're completely right. And I've said that to people on the door, because they ask me, well, what happens if you don't do anything? Get rid of me.
Right.
Vote me out. Like that's the entire point of having people power and organizing. If I don't do my job, kick me out. As one of my close allies and really good friends from Pontiac, Tamika Ramsey, points out, elections are hirings and job reviews. Every election is a job review. If you didn't do your job, we will vote you out if we feel you didn't do good enough. And that's the key thing that we need to talk about. We need people to come vote this year. And that's really hard in Pontiac, because as many people here know, probably Pontiac has one of the lowest voter turnouts anywhere in the state of Michigan. And for example, my win number to win my race is 262 people.
For an entire district in the city of Pontiac.
And that's a big city in Michigan. It's not
For
just
an entire district in the city of
Yeah.
Pontiac, I need to win 262 votes. And this is based on, of course, before the proposition in 2018. But it's because people don't show out to vote. And that's one of the biggest things that I have to overcome with my opponent, is that she's been there for 12 years. There are some people who may just vote for her out of pure muscle memory. There are enough people who voted against her last time with an unknown opponent, and the unknown opponent got 30% of the vote. So there is a sizable chunk of people who don't want her there. But for me to win, I need people who want this change, who are telling me that they want to see this change, to actually show up in November and give themselves this change.
So
because otherwise, it's not going to change.
There's no doubt in my mind you guys have been out knocking on doors.
Oh, yeah.
And letting
What are
them
you
know
allowed
this
to do to help people get to the polling places, though? I know there's some restrictions on what you can and cannot do. What's your ability to help people get down to cast their ballot?
So, one of the things I'm definitely aiming on doing is this is a very grassroots approach, and you'll see it the moment I say it. One of our precincts is extremely close to both of the apartment complexes that exist in my district that have a majority of the people. It's a very simple process of going over there myself and saying, hey, knock every single door, come vote. I will walk all of you to your precinct right down the street to make sure you come vote. Oh, you need help doing that? It's very much meeting people where they're at. That's a lot of what this campaign has been, is meeting people where they're at. Because to be very honest, I've knocked so many doors, and the vast majority of them, it's not even a funny number at this point, that nearly 90% of the doors that I knock have no clue who their current council person is. Or if they do, they have a passionate dislike for her. And that just shows me that people haven't been talked to, or they've been screwed over so much that they don't care anymore. And they've completely tuned out. And I'm doing everything I can to meet them where they are, to show them that someone actually cares for change in the city. That's not just a paycheck for me, but it's meant to actually change the city, to bring to be very honest, radical change to the city, because at this point we can't do little small incremental changes like getting a couple holes in the road patched. No, we need to do major things like holding people, landlords, apartment management companies, slumlords accountable for their housing, making sure that instead of patching all these roads around Pontiac, especially in my district, which has two of the worst roads in the city that people have to drive up and down every single day, actually get torn out and completely redone, making sure that when we bring businesses here, that they're not just, oh, hey, we have a shiny new building here and that's supposed to make Pontiac better. No, we need these places to have jobs for city residents that are actually filled by longtime city residents and not just people who you've had move here to work for you. Because that's what's been happening for a long time, is that things are happening in the city of Pontiac that are not happening to benefit the people who live here.
How many seats are up for grabs in this next election?
All of them.
All of them. Okay.
In the city of Pontiac, every single seat goes up during the same year. So districts 1 through 7 are all up.
And
Is there
anybody else
for
running
everyone?
who's also like-minded or better or progressive, also that could also make a difference in the composition here?
So Pontiac is a really weird city in terms of progressivism, because it's a establishment Black city. So progressivism is not a very common thing, or at least it's not referred to that way. There was a couple of us. I'm probably the most openly progressive. Leah is nodding her head yes immediately because she already knows.
Yes.
But there are definitely people who are running, who are especially much more like-minded, who I want to work with on council, especially as it comes to talking about cannabis. Because there are some people who have actively been like in favor of trying to get the ball rolling to get things actually addressed and processed in the city that hasn't happened in the past 4 years. Well, almost 4 years. So, I mean, like, there's a very good chance that we could possibly get a majority new council with people who are actually capable of doing what needs to be done on behalf of the residents of the city. I'm fairly confident that I am confident that I will at least have a majority of people who I can agree with a majority of the time. Which is
that's promising. That's
a big flip in Pontiac.
Yeah.
It's dramatically more promising because this current council.
Right.
Yeah.
And Adam, were you about ready to say something before? I'm sorry.
Probably, but
Okay. All right. Short-term memory loss. I wouldn't know anything about it. But.
Isn't that one like the side effects of cannabis supposedly?
Just breathing.
Yeah, supposedly. But,
that's why we leave the names up on everybody so we don't forget who they are, right?
Yeah, makes a difference when I look.
What are we talking about again?
Hey, so let's if you have anything else you'd like to add about your candidacy, let's do that, and let's just get a couple of minutes before it's all over and talk about Young Dems, because we have the chair and the vice chair here together, and I know you guys have been up to some stuff lately.
Oh, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, to quickly close out about me, so we can talk about Young Dems. I mean, so my main thing is I'm a 21-year-old running for Pontiac who has worked in politics since I was 16, including on a couple different progressive campaigns that we all know, be it Bernie Sanders, Abdul Syed, as well as, doing a lot of like work with the Young Democrats of Michigan, helping with the Progressive Caucus in the state of Michigan, as well as doing a couple different things across the country. So I do have actual like political organizing experience that I can bring to a city government. And I'm not just some 21-year-old who was just fresh out of school. And I'm running on things that mean a lot to the people who live here, who have to, call this place home, who don't have money, because most of us don't have money in a city where the median income is in the low 20K range. We need affordable housing. And I mean, high quality affordable housing that's not, falling apart and full of mold. We need to make sure that our roads are fixed, because I'm getting tired of having to see people ruin their cars over all these potholes. And now they can't get to work and now they are evicted. Making sure that people actually have jobs here that aren't just McDonald's. Making sure that they're getting, paid living wage or thriving wage jobs where they can actually afford to raise families.
Cannabis businesses usually provide that too.
Mm-hmm.
If only those would pop up in the city of Pontiac by now. I wonder what's been happening with that. But with that being said, that's really my main things when it comes to my campaign. If you want to donate, it's www.mikalforpontiac.com. If you want time to volunteer, you can also do that on the same thing,
Mhm.
as well as my social media is also linked to the website. But with that being said, Leah, it's your turn. Welcome to
Oh.
YDA.
Well, thank you for that, Mikal, and you have our support.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, YDM, man, that's really how me and Mikal got started on our friendship. So no, Young Dims has been up to a ton of stuff. So we just had a national convention actually in Cincinnati, Ohio. We had our state convention this past weekend. Mikal and I were both reelected unanimously to chair and vice chair. So, and then we got the rest of the board elected. We have 2 new members on the board for comms director and event director. We have a full board this cycle at the very beginning and a very dedicated board. So hopefully we'll get a lot of work done. But just a little bit about Cincinnati. We are part of the Young Dims of America. So I'm the national committee woman for the state of Michigan. So we have a national committee woman and a national committee man. That's Scott Urbanowski from the west side of the state. And we basically represent Michigan along with Ethan Petzold and Rob Sambarski for the national decisions, so to say. So we got to go to Cincinnati and we participated in convention with trainings and speakers and caucuses. And we were actually really successful. We got people elected to the Great Lakes region. Abel Delgado from the Progressive Caucus. He is now the treasurer for the Great Lakes region. Ishaya King from Flint, Michigan is now the Great Lakes region director for the Environmental Caucus, which we're super excited about because her and Abel have done a lot of work with the Flint water crisis. And Francesca Stevenson got elected as treasurer and secretary, and then Rob is now the Labor Caucus chair. So Michigan showed up, and we really did a lot of good work, and we have a lot of plans ahead of us. The new president of YDA is a real good friend, Quentin, from Minnesota, and I think that the organization is just going to thrive underneath him, and the potential is just so amazing. And it was pretty cool to be in a room surrounded by like-minded people from literally all over the country. Mikal, do you want to add anything about Cincy?
Yeah, well, first thing I want to say is I know he'll probably never see this, but another extra special shout out to Quinn Witham Ochama for way overhandedly taking the election for YDA. It's a very good thing to see again another young brown man being elected to office to actually be in charge and change things for the better. Mm-hmm. But no, Cincinnati was great, especially being in a room full of people who I haven't seen in a while due to COVID and the mishandling of COVID by a former occupant of the White House and his lackeys. But it was really good being able to see a lot of people who I haven't seen in a long time personally. Being around a bunch of people who are very similar age, who are doing all this organizing work across their respective states, across the country if they're elected to YDA as a whole. And seeing a lot of people who are passionate about change is a really, really nice thing. Running for office myself, seeing the decent number of young elected officials that were also attending YDA who are still involved, who are leading caucuses. So it's really nice seeing a bunch of young people who are from so many different backgrounds, who aren't from money or who aren't from power, who are doing all of this work to make change, including the people, of course, at the Michigan delegation, obviously, because I'm partial to that. And it may be because we were in Ohio, unfortunately, but, go blue. But it was really nice, being able to be around all those people.
Yeah. And we started doing work on our platform this past weekend, and I'm really excited because Zahada and I added a bunch of cannabis language into the platform. So we're calling for the destigmatization, the descheduling. We're calling for immediate expungement of everyone with nonviolent cannabis convictions. So we're making some pretty strong stances. We have a very progressive platform. Abel and I kind of go back and forth bickering over who has the more progressive caucus. But we're really excited that we're getting to push forward some really progressive ideas on a statewide level, but also on a national level. And I'm working with some members throughout the country to try to establish a cannabis caucus at the national level with YDA, so that we can kind of mirror some of what we've done with the cannabis caucus here in the MDP that YDM partners with on a bunch of projects, and use that structure to create a national caucus. So I'm really excited about all the opportunities that are in front of us. This is the most united youth organizing has been in the state of Michigan in decades. So it's really cool to see like so many different perspectives working together on the same issues. People who used to be at opposing sides have now come together and are going to conferences together. Like, it's a really good thing to see.
It's promising for our future. I mean, we need more consistent, better decision makers and those types of, serious positions in order to really affect the kind of changes that we're all talking about here. So it's got to start there. I mean,
we talk about trying to get like unbrainwashing people, right? Like, what my focus has been on with Young Dems is like investing in the young people so that they don't get fed the misinformation about cannabis, for instance, like that they know how to access their elected officials, that they do get registered to vote, so that like we're really directly investing in our young people and like pushing that direction, a much more progressive forward, but also creating a community for them. So like one of the things that I tell people is whenever you're organizing people or you're organizing money, and it's all about building relationships. So YDM and the Youth Caucus, they really create this like this networking, but this community, this family where we all have each other's back. And like we all show up for Mikal, we all show up for Christian, we all show up for Austin and Rob. Like, it's a really cool thing to see that, you're not by yourself pushing for these changes all the time, because it can get really frustrating and heavy sometimes. So like YDM for a lot of us really is that helpful kind of push to say, hey, you've got people beside you. So we're very excited for these next 2 years. I think we're going to get a lot of really good work done.
And if I can add something in there, I know one big thing that for me has especially been my first real big break in terms of like actually officially organizing within the party was joining YDM back in 2019. And after gaining my foothold and doing, a lot of different things, like being on 7 different executive boards across multiple organizations, I've picked up on a lot of knowledge. And it's kind of solidified one of the things for me of ever since a very young age, I've hated the whole wait your turn mindset. Mm-hmm. So YDM has kind of been like a personal passion project for me to invest in and build up as many young people as possible. That way we can forcibly start reminding people, oh, you think that we're too young for this? All right, now when I win, I want you to say that to my face again. And it's kind of one of those things that I've gotten tired of seeing it happen to other young people, whether they just be organizing, whether they're trying to get involved, or whether they're running for office. I'm tired of seeing this dismissal of young people as if we are not capable of being in charge, not capable of fighting for the good fight.
Is that part of like that establishment mentality? Would you say like that's the process that's kind of developed over time? And
and as we can tell, not the establishment candidate, not the establishment vice chair.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, Jamie. There's that idea of like, you start off with like volunteering, then you start off with school board, then you go to city council, and like so on and so forth. And you're supposed to do it at a certain age. And like, for me, the environmentalist issue is really what got me involved. And like for that, like there was no waiting. Like you can't sit back and wait. So like YDM really exists to tell people like, no, you're right. Like there's no reason for you to sit and wait. Like here, let's help you get the resources. You want to learn field, we'll teach you field. You want to know how to do finance calls, we'll teach you finance calls. You're thinking about running for office and you need to be connected with organizers. Here, we'll connect you with organizers. And it's really that support network, because each of us started kind of on our own through separate issues or one campaign, and we all sort of found each other, I guess you could say. And so we're trying to continue to create this space for people.
Right on. So Jen Bronson's asking about what the age ranges are for Young Dems.
Oh yeah, so it's anyone who's in the MDP between the ages of 16 to 36. And that's the same thing for YDA. So you're able to be involved in the Young Dems of America until you're 36.
And I will happily say that I think that YDM has recently elected its youngest board member ever, which I'm very happy about, which was Rochelle Evans, who is 17.
Yeah,
right.
So our membership director, yeah.
Nice. Can't even vote yet, but it's definitely has a leadership position.
Yeah,
already.
So the cool thing is she gets to vote in the party election. So she'll be able to vote for Attorney General Nessel, for the Supreme Court candidate. So, no, like I said, investing in the future. Like, I'm not exactly the youngest of the Dems anymore. I'm 26 now. So like bringing on the 17, the 18, the 19-year-olds and seeing their like extreme passion is so refreshing and so wonderful. And like, they're really hard workers, and our membership's growing, our chapters are growing, the influence is growing, and it's a very progressive platform that we're out there pushing forward.
So Jen,
And-
also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mikal. Go ahead.
I was saying, it's also very funny because like at one point I was the youngest member of YDM at 19 when I first joined. So then like now becoming 21 and being like, I want to invest in people who are younger than me, which again, I'm still on the very younger end of the spectrum when it comes to Young Democrats of America. But like being able to pull in as many younger people as possible to get involved in the process of really fighting for their future and not letting it be in the hands of other people is a really nice, empowering thing that feels good for myself, but as well as makes me somewhat confident in our future by getting people involved in much younger.
Yeah.
So I have a birthday coming up at the end of this week, and I'll find myself slightly outside of a participatory range. What about people that have, and Jen Bronson actually wants to know, who have participated or want to help out with this organization, even though, beyond the age limit?
Yeah. Well, for getting involved, I would follow our socials. So we have a pretty active Facebook page. It's just Young Dems of Michigan. And we have a pretty active Facebook group, and that's where we post a lot of our events and things. And all of our events are open to anyone. It doesn't matter what your age is. The only thing that's ever closed age-wise is our elections, just based on our bylaws. But like, we had a fundraiser in Taylor, and I would say like 25% of the attendees were Dems that were aged out of Young Dems, but are supporters of Young Dems. So they showed up to the fundraiser. So coming to fundraisers, to rallies, to trainings, those types of things are going to be open to anyone within, really within Michigan. You don't even have to be an MDP member.
Oh, good answer. So we're going to start winding down because we're getting to the end of the hour, but really had a great discussion. I appreciate you guys coming on a lot. And I guess one last thing, you've heard of in the city of Ann Arbor being favorable toward entheogenic plants and fungi. In fact, September is by unanimous decision a month dedicated to the education and understanding of those things. And there's an ENTHEOFEST. It would be nice, and I'm sure it's not on the docket right now, we haven't gotten to it, if the city of Pontiac could follow suit and embrace such things. And a group to talk to would be Decriminalized Nature in Michigan and Jim Salang right here. And Colin, who sometimes joins us, would be some really good people to have that discussion with. I'd like to move it forward in that direction also.
There's a decrim started in Grand Rapids, mid-Michigan, Detroit, Ann Arbor. That's Hazel Park, which also includes Madison Heights. So there's a lot that you can just set a chapter up, and feel free to reach out to me or the group on Facebook, and we can definitely get you in touch if anyone who wants to start that chapter.
Yeah, I mean, because I definitely work with enough people in one of my nonprofits where we've had this discussion before, because the criminalization of natural plants is kind of one of the dumbest things to have ever happened anywhere in our government, and there's a reason why I believe Portugal decriminalized all drugs, and there was a very positive effect that happened with that. So it's somewhat of a template or a push when it comes to what we need to do over here.
I agree.
Definitely.
Anything either one of you would like to leave us with before we kind of wind down and wrap up the show?
Yeah, I would just say don't feel afraid to reach out to me or Mikal directly. We're both very accessible. Mikal for his campaign, as well as both of us for YDM. And yeah, just stay involved. Find an issue or something that matters to you and go for it, because it really, like we were talking about, some races are decided by one vote, and some changes are done by one person or a small group. So like, it really can make a huge difference. So just stay involved and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And Mikal, you have anything to add?
Besides, if you live in Pontiac somehow, please vote for me if you're in my district. If you can't afford to, please donate at my website or volunteer and help out. But one of the main things I want to leave everyone else with is believe in change. That's the baseline. No matter what it is, believe in change, because it's a driving force, because you need to be able to believe that better things are possible to do better things. Well, it doesn't matter what issue it is, doesn't matter what campaign, doesn't matter what it is. You need to be able to believe in change. So not only believe in it, but also go out there and do it.
Right
That's
on. Quite awesome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys very much. I really appreciate this talk. Kind of enlightening and inspiring with some hope.
Good. That's what
Could
we're here
use that
for.
little bit of that. So,
Yeah,
hey,
Thank you guys so much. It was so good to see everybody.
Thank you for having us
We'll
on.
talk soon. Yep, no problem.
Bye, guys.
We'll be
Bye.
checking back in after you win.
Sure will.
Amen.
All right. Jim, with a little bit of time left, you want to reiterate anything? Or we talked about September 19th quite a bit, but please, just throw out those facts again real quick.
Yes, September 19th at the DIAG at the University of Michigan's Hatcher Library, where Hash Bash takes place, will be the ENTHEOFEST starting 11 a.m. We have Brennan Andrus with his friends bring in musical instruments to jam to start the show off. It's going to be an incredible engagement of speakers from around the country, from around the state, just celebrating plant medicines and the passing of the resolution that the anniversary is passing. Global Mushroom Day is September 20th, and then the entire month of September for the city of Ann Arbor is, Sacred Mushroom and Plant Awareness Month. So,
Right. Very
it's
cool.
pretty amazing.
Adam, anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Not really. We're planning a trip to Amsterdam for November. That's what's big on mine.
And your dab and stab shows, talk about that
Dab
sometimes.
and
Those
stab
are,
every morning,
Yeah.
9 a.m. during the week, 10 a.m. on the weekends.
and people
So
guess
it's
what your
fun.
glucose reading is going to be. And if they
Yeah, it's
get the
always an
closest, then they
adventure.
win.
It's like Cedar Point.
It is. It's exactly like Cedar Point. And you can do it in your PJs. So,
Right on. Or without any pants on, as you often.
well, so be the case.
Don't do that at Cedar Point.
All right. Yeah, true. So, Rick, how about wrapping us up? And I think it had another great show.
We did have another great show. Again, some wonderful advice from Josh Covert, attorney at law, about how to keep yourself protected. And then some examples of people who are out there trying to protect us with Leah and with Mikal. We're talking about the future of America here. And then beyond that, the future of planet Earth. We need more people with a fresh perspective in positions of leadership and power. And I think we have some pretty good examples of people who are attaining that right now. And I hope they inspire others to do the same. We have really had a lost generation of people incarcerated. Some of the best minds of the generation were put in jail and never had a chance to flower and blossom the way that they normally could have. And we have to do better going forward. And this is a step in the right direction.
Real nice. I agree. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Another great show. Really appreciate it. Jazz Cabbage. We got a well said, Rick, on the way out in the comments. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll talk to you soon next week. Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
Take care.
Thanks, man.
See you.